Hey guys. So tonight I wanted to talk about offerings and sacrifice and sort of more of a modern perspective of the topic of sacrifice. But first, I think I'll start with offerings and how I use them in my craft and my pagan practice. Offerings are honestly, for me, they're mostly just a sign of respect or to essentially show my deities that I am engaging with them and that I appreciate them. I don't often leave bargain offerings, at least that's what I like to call them, um, where I'm asking for something in return. Occasionally I will, but more often than not, it's more of just an appreciation and a way to keep that line open. More more frequently I will use offerings that are dried herbs or in the form of incense, mostly because I have children and pets around my house. And so I'm not very comfortable leaving alcohol or food out in case little hands or paws get on it. But there are times where, for say, if we have fruit that is going to spoil, I will actually take it outside and give it to nature. And it's more not so much to give to a certain deity, but I will say a blessing or basically saying that I'm offering this to the spirit of the land. But more often than not, most of my offerings are given in the form of dried herbs or incense. I do occasionally when I am doing ritual, I will pour alcohol in the libation or offering bowls that I have for my deities. And then once the ritual is confirmed or um, not long after it, I don't let it sit for very long, like I said, because of pets and kids, but I will pour it out on the earth and basically offer it to that specific deity. Um, Other offerings that I do give are sometimes my time and my attention. And this is where we will kind of get into the topic of having modern sacrifice here in a modern pagan path. And a lot of people tend to have a misconception of sacrifice because, or say, the Aztecs, they used to sacrifice people. And this is not something that was uncommon for many ancient pagan cultures. Although I did read recently that the Aztecs would sacrifice a teenage boy, but the year up to that, he was treated like a king, which I thought was really interesting. But that concept of bloodshed sacrifice is not unknown to our history as a human race and in many cultures. But now in modern day paganism, it is it can still be carried out, but in a different way. And I'm going to share the ways that I carry out sacrifice in my own pagan path, but also other suggestions for how you can carry out sacrifice. I'm sorry, I have an itchy nose. It's itchy season. Um, the biggest one is time. Dedicating your time to your practice, dedicating your time to your deities, dedicating your time to your magical studies, to getting hands-on, to stepping into the astral, to meditating. You are giving your precious time to them. And the gods see that. The gods know that. And that is, to me, one of the biggest sacrifices that I can make, especially as a person who has young children, and most of my time goes to them. So when I do have free time, it's very sparse, and it's if I do give it to my deities instead of on the couch and eating ice cream when there's not little ones constantly begging for treats. Um, that is something that is showing sacrifice to me. Um, Now, this other suggestion for sacrifice is actually one that I personally cannot partake in just because I tend to get hypoglycemic, but which means low blood sugar. Um, But fasting is another form of sacrifice that you can do. And there are many different ways to fast, and there are many different cultures that fast. And there's a ton of information on the internet about fasting. But if you choose to fast or abstain from food for a certain amount of time, there's a lot of resources on the internet that can help you do that in a safe way. I don't have much to my personal experience because, like I said, this is not something that I can personally do because it will cause some health problems. Um, but that is something to consider. So, food and time. You can also sacrifice giving up something. We see this practice often with Lent, but you could basically sacrifice your time away from technology to go out into nature and to commune with the gods or whatever you follow or connect with. Um, Again, that is pulling you away from one one part and transitioning into basically another part of being, and it opens up your awareness to actually commune, I think. Um, so that's another form of sacrifice. Now, I'm going to kind of refer to a book that I've been reading. And I really want to talk more about this book because I this is probably one of the best books I have read in quite some time, and I really wish that there were more like this. But I'm referring to Of Blood and Bones by Kate Fuller. Um, I really enjoyed this book, as I said before. It really kind of demystifies a lot of the misconceptions about witchcraft, even within the community, or say like using bodily fluids or in your spell work or um sacrifice as I'm talking about now. But it does it in a very grounded way. For approaching this is how to do this safely. Even using animal parts in your craft, this she provides a whole list of things that you can do, places you can purchase them from that are ethical, ways that you can get them that are ethical. And if you choose not to do that, here is a list of things that you can do that are replacements, essentially, if that's not something that you want to have in your craft, because to each our own, this is all personal to us. But she had a really good section on sacrifice that I really enjoyed reading through, and should have bookmarked it. Here it is. um, so she talks a lot about, or there's a section where she talks about sacrificing for divination or to gain clear sight. And again, that is a favor sacrifice. And that's perfectly fine to ask your deities for favors, to ask them for guidance, to ask them for clarity. And if you want to give something up to have that equivalent exchange, by all means, if that's something that you want to do. I'm just stating that overall, on average, most of my offerings or sacrifice performed to my deities are really in the sense of just me keeping that line of communication open versus having a asking for a favor. Um, but there was a section in here where she talks about the ideas of modern sacrifice. And the first is food or drink, which we just discussed, technology fasting, removing yourself from modern and kind of going into um, nature. This is something that I think would be another one. Let's see. I'm just gaining my bearings here. In this book, she also says that the other suggestions for sacrifice would be um, like abstaining from makeup, essentially, or meat or animal products in your diet, um, or even sexuality or sugar, or not sexuality, sex in general, sugar. But I would also argue that um, makeup can be an offering to your deities. so can sex. And this is actually something that comes from my perspective, from my own path, because of the deity that I work with. My main deity is Freya, and she is the goddess of love and beauty and sex and war and death. And my one of my most recent videos was on my experiences with her. Sorry, I'm adjusting 'cause my back hurts. But oftentimes when I adorn makeup, it is an empowering experience, and it is a offering to her. Um, because I am honoring my own beauty and what makes me feel good as a person. So that's a little bit different from sacrifice. That's more in the offering category, but we're discussing both, and I might jump back and forth a little bit. But another offering, as I said, is sex. Engaging in your sexuality and your sexual self is something that you can offer um, as an offering to your deities. And to be perfectly honest, that's something that Freya greatly enjoys. So, um, taking that moment to have that pleasure and to build that energy, you are essentially building a charge within yourself. You're doing magic pretty much. And so, um, at least for most women, that requires a lot of concentration and a lot of focus, just as meditation would or magic. So that's also something to think about, giving your focus, your attention, again, your time, to honor yourself and thus honor your deity, because we are basically a facet of the gods. At least that's what I believe. I am a facet of the deities that I work with, and parts of me are parts of them, and vice versa. So that's one thing to think about when it comes to offerings. But there's many different things that you can do for sacrifice that are very different, or that are, not the common misconception that we have based on ancient societies. And you can quite get creative with this. But again, I will say my biggest ones are my time and um, my focus and my attention. And if there's something that I can give up, for instance, like putting my phone down and going outside and listening, that is a sacrifice to me, because we are very connected in our modern world. And oftentimes I find that I'm struggling quite a bit with feeling connected to my path because I'm so engulfed in the mundane. So having your time and dedicating yourself to your practice and your deities, that is one of the best gifts that you can give, and that is one of the best sacrifices that you can give. Keep in mind that sacrifice doesn't have to be a negative connotation. You don't have to give up anything you're not willing to give up. Um, Sacrifice can also come in the shape of shadow work, shedding something that you've grown from away from, or be it a habit, a person, or a misconception within yourself. That is something that you can give as sacrifice to say, I have moved past this and I'm ready to let it go. And you can honor yourself and your deities by doing that. Our spiritual paths, and to me personally, my spiritual path is deeply psychological as well. So everything that I do within my magic and my practice as a pagan is greatly built upon the foundation of my own psyche and understanding myself in the many different facets, including my shadow. So if things are poking at my shadow, it's very important for me to understand why, and to slowly piece apart what that could be and why is that happening, and take a moment to sit with it. But keep in mind that moving past a part of yourself or something in general that you no longer feel connected to, especially if it's something difficult to let go of, that is a form of sacrifice. So consider that also. Um, when we go through even and cleanse our personal things that we no longer resonate with, you can consider that a form of sacrifice. Because again, I'm really more looking at it under the lens of just letting go and moving on can be a form of sacrifice. But um, I think that's all I had to say tonight. My video for sacrifice, but I hope I made sense. I know I kind of wavered back and forth, but I just really wanted to talk about this topic a little bit more. And if you guys have any questions or you want me to elaborate on anything that I've discussed tonight, please leave a comment down in the comments below. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as always, blessing be.